Okay, so we're back. We're just about to mix these drums. A couple things I noticed. The drum sizes I read wrong. This is 13, and then 16, and then 18. So I just wanted to make that correction. Also, I'm not sure if we should keep these intervals. It's a little quiet. Hang on, let me turn this up a bit. Oh, hang on. There we go. Like that, or like this. Now, I guess we'll keep them the way they are. Sounds cool. All right, so let's mix some drums. And the first thing we might want, I'm thinking, is some sort of reference. I might just take the guitar tone that he has and just kind of throw it in there. Just so we kind of can make sure, especially with headphones, it's really hard to keep, to stay objective. Like it's really easy to get ear fatigue and stuff like that, and to kind of lose track of how things kind of sound. So it's nice to have some sort of reference, and I'm gonna grab some guitars for that, of just whatever kind of tone he had going on here. And we'll take these, and we'll throw them down temporarily in our drum bus here. Drum folder. We'll pan them left, right, because I undid all the panning, so we'll have to do that. And let's set the volume for these. Okay, well those guitars are, we could probably make them work for this, but the EQ of them is a little thin, I think. Yeah, these are kind of a little interesting. That's probably okay for now. Like that's probably a close approximation of something we might end up with eventually. Yeah, the other problem with these drums is they already sound so good that like there's not much to say about mixing them. They already sound awesome, so it's not the most difficult thing to mix. So, but let's go through them all. I'm also gonna just change some of the velocities here quickly, just to make sure that everything's kind of set at velocities that kind of make sense. All right. Yeah, whatever, it works. And this could be interesting. Cool. And these guys. Wow, that guitar needs to be intonated, that's for sure. Okay, so moving on, let's check out our kick mics here, what we're gonna do with them. Have to folder both, or have to solo both. No, we don't. How am I gonna solo this? There we go. The normal way, apparently. I don't know what I was thinking. Okay, so let's have a listen to our drum. And the first thing, I don't really want to touch a lot in the mixer because I think it's kind of like cheating for this example, kind of. Like it's kind of, if I just like, you know, blend mics to sound better and make it sound better from the source, it's not really gonna be, you know, I won't be fixing stuff. Like I won't be really demonstrating how to make stuff, you know, fix problems that will arise, that could potentially arise or whatever. So I'll probably just leave most of that stuff the way it sounds, because if you got drum sounds coming to you that sounded this good, like just someone sent you tracks that sound this good, you'd be very, very lucky, and they'd be a stellar engineer. Like to get stuff that did the raw tracks like this would be ridiculous. Pretty much only pro productions would have stuff like this. You're gonna end up having tracks that will have a lot more issues and a lot much less balanced out of the gate. Anyways, so with the kick here, okay, so you can kind of hear some. It's kind of like a. It's not exactly papery, but it's kind of like a weird, akin to, it's between paper and basketball, I guess. I don't know. Right here. It's like a papery basketball, and we want to get rid of a lot of that. But don't be too heavy-handed with any of your EQ. A lot of people are very, very heavy-handed, and it kind of like can kill the character, and it can kill the tonality of the drums. Only take out kind of what you need to, because, you know, ultimately you want to do as little processing as possible to get to your end result. Okay. And then we have, it sounds like we have some pretty good click attack if we needed to use it to make the kick drum kind of cut through. There's actually a lot of ranges in there that we could use to help the kick drum cut through if we needed to, but hopefully we won't really need to do too much of that. And with re-EQ, if we do 2 high passes, we can change the steepness of the curve. Because if you only do 1, you get I think it's 24 dB per octave. But if you do 2, if you add a band and do 2 high passes in the same place, you can make it 48. Kind of thing, like you can increase the steepness of it. So if you need to do a steeper high pass or low pass, it's one trick you can do to do it. 24 is good for most situations though. I think we're gonna want to place, he sent, there's MIDI that came with the bass, and the nice thing about MIDI with bass is you can do, you can use like a sine synth or something similar to that to do a crazy, awesome, solid low end. And so I'm going to move the kick up a bit higher, because I'm not going to give the kick the sub lows. I'm going to give the bass guitar the sub lows, because we can do a killer job of that with the MIDI. So let's do that. And we're going to move the kick up in frequency a little bit, and try and have it kind of hit more around 80 to 100 kind of range if we can. So it sounds kind of odd, and this kick's not really tuned super well for it. Let's try it down to 70. Yeah, we can probably, it's interesting and it's kind of cool. Yeah, we can do something like that. We'll probably have to fiddle with it as we have the guitars and bass in to really figure out where we can kind of sit it, but that's kind of cool. And if you do a good job of meshing the bass guitar with the kick, a lot of the times, whenever the bass and the kick land together, you're going to get the low end filled out anyway. It'll actually make the kick sound bigger. That's where a big part of tracking comes in the quality of the tracking and how tight things are. You'll get a lot of that happening where things kind of mix themselves. Like you can really get things to just mesh and hit well together and fill out each other's kind of spectrums and stuff and sound really large. And yeah. So the other thing we want to do with the kick is I typically wouldn't compress a kick because you're going to, essentially with compression, you're either going to turn into a sausage, which is going to, like you're going to lower the attack and have the sustain, bring up the sustain, and you're going to turn it into a sausage. And it's kind of a, you know, it's a percussive instrument. You don't really want to be doing that. Well, I don't anyway, because then it has less impact. And that basically is the sound of overcompression, which I'll demonstrate for you now. Okay, hang on. So that's just really fast attack, really fast release. And you'll hear this a lot in a lot of modern recordings. And it kind of sounds almost like a modern record. And it's actually the sound of overcompression is it's when you've neutered your attack and your release is really quick and you're just turning everything to a loud sausage, and it can kind of like make things sound more impressive by themselves. But then when you mix it all together, everything, like if everything's big, nothing is. So it's not a good idea to do this attack release really fast thing and just slam crap. Like it really is going to be detrimental to the overall mix. So what you want to do to set, like I wouldn't compress this kick anyway because it's already pretty punchy and stuff like that. And like if we wanted to enhance the transient, we could do this. We'll set the threshold really low because it's important to be able to hear compression. Like it's one of the harder things to hear. So you really want to slam it so you can hear what you're doing, and then take your attack and adjust it until you can clearly hear like the attack of the kick coming through to the extent that you want. And if you adjust it up here and it really isn't sounding any like that much different, you've probably gone too far. You don't really need to be letting that much of the transient through because you're beyond the transient, so you're not really shaping it correctly at that point. I'd say 30 would sound good. Like I probably won't use this, but this is an example of how you would do it if you had, say, a fightier kick that you wanted to have more transient response, something like that. This is what you would do. And then so with the release, we'll do the same thing where we'll just kind of play with it until it sounds the way we want it to. And like when you have the release longer, you're pushing down the tail of the sound, so you're basically increasing your transient and then pushing down the tail end of it. Like I'll show you kind of here, you can hear it. And there'll be a sweet spot for this too. Like probably right there is probably the best compression settings if you're trying to make it punchier. You can mess with your ratio or whatever you want if you want to as well. So that's plenty punchy, and then you just adjust your threshold, back it off so it doesn't sound ridiculous. And there you go, there's a punchy kick drum. I don't know if we need that much punch. It was already pretty punchy to begin with, but we can listen to it in the context. One thing I'm noticing already is our rooms are taking up a lot of space, which they typically do, and we might want to deal with some low-end resonances here too. Like rooms can be really muddy really fast, so we'll just quickly dial some mud in here. You'll typically want to high pass and low pass rooms because usually you slam them, and you'll find that the cymbals become really bright and stuff in them, and it makes a wash of everything high and low. You really only want to use room mics for generally mid-frequency reinforcement. You know, there's no real rules, but this is what people typically end up doing. And then we'll do well, I guess we won't quite work on that yet, but that should be a little cleaner sounding. Okay, and the far room we'll do now, which is going to be the same kind of thing. Just dial out some mud. And as we can hear, whatever room this was recorded in has a resonance buildup wherever the mic was placed at this frequency. All right, cool. And then the trick to mixing room mics and stuff is you just want to notice when they're gone, but you don't usually want them to be so loud that you can actually like hear them. It depends on the genre you're doing, but this is metalcore, and typically rooms are a little quieter in metalcore than most other genres. So you would just play them, and then when you mute them, you want to be able to hear. So play it with them, play it without them. It's a pretty substantial difference. We'll turn them down a bit for now and just kind of leave them in there. That's probably fine for now. And then we'll go on to the snare here. So with the snare, we can check it out. like to me, the snare sounds fine. Like there's really not much you'd have to do with it EQ wise. Like it's pretty clean and there's not really any bad resonances. Because I mean, there's a resonance at like 300, but that's kind of like that's not really a problem. It's more so it's like fundamental note that it's kind of resonating at, so it's not really a big deal. If you compressed it and it came out too much, you might have to EQ it down, but if you take that out, it's gonna sound kind of deadish and have less character and maybe be less clear in the mix. So I wouldn't really touch that. For compression, you usually have to do some tricks with compression with normal snare performances because they're uneven. But when you're working with MIDI and stuff and you have it like this, it's perfectly even, which makes it kind of easy. Because then you're just using compression. You're not really using it to try and level out a performance so much as you're just shaping the sound of the snare to something that you like. So if you hear this and you think like, maybe I want it to be like, more transient, again, we'll just do the same kind of thing we did last time. We'll solo the snare here. We'll repeat this. It's just the top of the snare. So do this and then crank it down and turn it into a sausage, which some people will like the sound of, sadly, and then back the attack off until you actually hear the attack of the actual snare drum properly. So about 25 milliseconds sounds pretty good, and then we'll adjust the release. Here's where we adjust the release. You can choose kind of when the ring out of the snare kind of comes back in, when it starts recovering, like when the actual ring out of it or the ringing of it comes back into play. And you could actually set this release to be rhythmic with the song if you wanted like that, and that kind of can add some energy. If you get the right release times, you can actually use them to add groove to the song and stuff like that and give it kind of more of a driving feel. That sounds cool to me. We'll just back this off. All right, so now your snare is hitting hard. We could do, in Reacomp, if we want it to be more like a 1176 style compressor, we could reduce the RMS size downwards, and it'll behave more like a FET kind of compressor sound. And if we turn it up, it'll behave more like an opto or a tube, Veramu or whatever. Subtle, but yeah. I'll leave it at 5. I like the sound of 5 the best. I mean, sounds cool to me. And let's do the bottom of the snare now. And often when you're mixing snares, you'd have to actually flip the phase of them, like change their polarity. With this, I think they've already done it because the snare sounds fantastic. Hang on, let's just check, make sure. I'm pretty sure they would. Yeah, it sounds more full with it, with the phase not flipped, so they've already done that for you. Okay, and we'll apply the same compression. Actually, let's do this a different way. Let's just bust the snares together, like the two snare mics, top and bottom. And I'll do this with a lot of stuff. We'll just process both at once because they can use pretty similar processing. And they combine to be one sound anyway, so we'll just adjust our compression here. Okay, and then we'll adjust the bottom snare so we have the right amount of crack that we want. Which is hard to say. Like, we'll have to adjust that in context with the mix and the cymbals and stuff to really get that right. So here's our kick and snare. Our kick mic probably is too boomy for our snare sound now. So we'll take out some of that 250 hertz range. There we go. And that kind of fits okay together. All right, cool. Yeah, it's pretty easy when you have great sounding source material. I probably should have, I should do a project that's just garbage and just show how to fix it, because that'd be a lot more educational than just taking good drums and kind of putting a sheen on them. So cymbals, we have our hi-hat track, which I'll just turn down unless we decide we need it. We just won't have it until we decide we need it. Toms. What did it end up doing on our kicks? Did I compress that? Oh yeah, I guess I just leave the compressor on it. It's common to sometimes do slight amount of limiting on kicks so they end up being about the same, like end up being the same level, because sometimes the transient can really vary from kick to kick. And it's nice to kind of clamp down on that a little bit just to make sure it sits. Again, not as big of a problem with MIDI drums, but it's kind of a good idea to kind of limit everything anyway. Like even something like this, just on every single bus you have, like to kind of limit things. If you want a modern style production sound, just kind of give everything a little bit of limiting, just to make sure that if there's a stray hit or something, it doesn't pop right out, because that kind of makes it sound like not as much of a polished mix and stuff like that, if that's the intention of it. So it's not a bad idea if you're doing this kind of genre and stuff to just limit everything a little bit. Would definitely be like a good idea every bus track you have. And we'll do some parallel compression and stuff at the end of this mix here, of this drum mix anyway, which is kind of a similar thing. I guess you'll see if you haven't seen it before. Kick mics, we did snare, hi-hat, we'll do the toms. Toms usually just involve some simple EQ. We can again increase the transient if we want by compressing it, or well, we can either increase the transient of it, or we could flatten it out and make them sausage-like. It depends on the sound you like. Okay. So here's a tom. I wonder if there's any like parts that use more than one. Yeah, we'll just do this for now. Okay, so this is our 18-inch tom, which is really low, which will make it kind of challenging to mix, I guess. And typically you do a pretty big mid scoop with toms, because there's usually a lot of 500 hertz kind of garbage boxy crap. And that sounds cool to me. Toms also have a lot of low end, which is a challenge because you have the bass and kick down there as well. I typically take the toms out of the low end, which makes the kick drum and stuff sound kind of heavier if the toms aren't also in that same range, because it's like you can't give everything the same range. You have to make some decisions about what fits in what spectrum and how much stuff you're actually gonna be able to fit in realistically. It would have been easier to mix this if we had used larger toms, because then they would have been up higher in the frequency spectrum. But this is kind of, well, this will have a cool sound, so we'll just do this and go with it. Okay, we'll see kind of what we get. And make them both high passes. Try and just get rid of that bottom. You can hear like that resonance at that frequency that's down here. I just don't want that. There we go, that's pretty clean. We'll just double check this again here. About 400 hertz is probably where all the garbage is. All right, cool. And the other thing about these tracks, they don't have any bleed, which again makes you have a lot of EQ choices and stuff when there's no bleed on the tracks. A lot of people might do stuff like saturation and stuff. You can if you want. I find like saturation to me is similar to like there's times to use it, and I'll show you later in the mixing process when I would use it. But there's also it's the same thing as the really fast compression releasing, where you're kind of making everything a sausage. And like it kind of sounds good, but it doesn't, like, because every time you add saturation, you're adding harmonic content and stuff like that, and you're taking up space in the mix, and it's just like you can't just make everything bigger, otherwise nothing's big. So you can't just like add saturation to everything and expect everything to sound big. It doesn't really work that way. I find that the biggest mixes are are the ones where I typically leave most things clean and use saturation very selectively as an effect only. But you know, however you guys want to use it, it's cool. Not the master. Okay, so I just pasted this EQ over to the next tom here, and typically I'll just come up, the smaller the size, I'll just come up a bit on the EQs, and then I'll redo this. Like the resonance is inside the drum will change. You'll have to re-seek out all of the, you know, you have to seek it out every time. Yeah, I'm just gonna repeat just this. That's hard to say. There's a resonance rate at 200, but that's like probably closer to something more to do with the tuning, the fundamental of the drum. So you probably don't want to EQ that out. I'm just looking for like some garbage frequencies we can get rid of here. It's kind of tricky though, because there's some attack here and stuff that you don't really want to. This one doesn't seem to need as much of a drastic EQ to kind of sound similar to the other one. So that sounds about right to me. You might notice I'm mixing this all in headphones. I don't know if I mentioned that. This is just, I'm trying to emulate what typical bedroom warrior might have. These are AKG 702s. Tom 1, I have to find where it's played. Oh, there we go. That was easy. And we'll copy the EQing again. Over to that. And we'll do it again. I don't really know if that needs to be EQ'd any higher. Like, it sounds fine there. Leave that one at 90 or whatever. Let's find some garbage frequencies. Even less on this one. Okay. I might have to do some leveling and stuff too. Anyways, we'll make a bus track for these toms here. For stuff that's gonna, all the effects will go on all of them, which I don't know what those will be yet, but we might need some in the future. So overheads, the typical metal thing to do is to high pass them something like this, and we'll hear what that sounds like. That makes for a really clean and separated track. You know, if you want a lot of separation in your drums, this is a good move. If you want a more cohesive drum sound, don't do this. Do more of a rock style thing, which is more like this. Especially, and you might not have the option to do this if you're sample replacing and stuff like that, and the overheads don't sound, the drums don't sound great in the overheads. But if it's played well, you can do this, and you lower your high pass substantially, and you actually use the overheads to get some of the space and characteristics of the drums kind of like going through it. So you leave the shells in there, but you still have to dial mud out. Because like this is a lot of information to add to your drum sound that could conflict with your close mic, so you really have to be careful when you're EQing this. Like you can hear, there's a lot of interesting resonance around this area. I still slightly hear it in the lower. And this is more like what I like my overheads to sound like. Just kind of a nice picture of the kit overall. I think there's still some issues here though. Yeah, hang on, I have to dial that out a bit. All right, maybe we'll just raise this high pass up a bit here. And if you get your kick in it like that, it becomes quite a bit harder to EQ because the high end of your kick is coming through the overheads, and it's kind of hard to split the EQing between the two. Can make for some interesting sounds if you do it though. I still hear some mud, but it's probably too low level to make much of a difference. There we go. Pretty close to gone. So that's pretty good overhead sound. A lot of times, if you have problems mixing drums too bright or something like that, you could keep your overhead tracks and don't boost them, but like leave them, only do cuts on them, and never make anything brighter than your cymbals already are through the mics. And then you'll know your drum tracks are likely not too bright if you're not boosting anything. So for example, you just leave your overheads on while you're checking like. So when you're mixing your kick and snare, make sure that they're not too bright for the overheads, which this snare actually might be. So instead of boosting the overheads like some people do for shimmer and stuff, which can be kind of done in mastering as well. Let's see here. A lot of people add some air and stuff too, but I would typically just take the snare and just kind of dial that out a little bit. Okay, so our drum mix is coming together. Let's add the rims in to see how they sound. Okay, let's add just one rim at a time here so we can really hear what it's doing. And then we have just a really nice kind of drum sound going on, pretty natural sounding so far, which is kind of more where I go generally when I can anyway. I like more natural drum sounds, but we'll do some parallel compression and stuff like that just to add some like just kind of a glue to it. And we'll probably be refining this as we mix the other instruments in. Yeah, as I said, with tracks that sound this good, you know, you don't have to do that much. I'm trying to think of other stuff that I could do to this. It'll probably come to me later. All right, let's just do some bus compression here. Okay. Drums. There's a few ways we can do bus compression. There's this way. I don't have names for them. Here's the two typical ways. Oh, 3 typical ways people do bus compression. I'll show you right now. Okay. So one way is you basically just kind of just take the transients and do some compression with just the transients. And we'll do the same. We'll set our compressor the same way we always do. We'll drop the threshold way down so we can hear it. You can hear that the kick is pumping it heavily. You might like the sound of that and think that's super cool. A lot of people do that. Yeah, some of it's musical and cool. It can easily be overdone. But you can take your detector input here. Or sorry, it's not. Yeah, it's a side chain. It's hard to explain. You'll have to look at what side chain compression is and stuff like that. But there's a low pass and a high pass here, so we can tell it not to detect the bass drum as much by high passing what it's detecting out of the signal. So you'll hear as we put this up, it kind of cuts the low end of it stops using the low end of the signal to trigger when it's compressing. So we're gonna just use this to balance it out a bit here. Okay, cool. And then we'll adjust the attack till it sounds cool. And the release till it sounds cool. And that is cool. Actually, speaking of that, I'll show you what another thing that people do commonly right now is you would leave it really heavily compressed like this. Like that. And that gives you a nice vibey kind of sound. And then you take the dry signal and then you turn the dry signal up and then you're just parallel compressing it. And so you get the vibiness of it, but you also get the dry signal in there, and the dry signal keeps the naturalness of it, and just and then your compressed signal just reinforces the sound of the drum kit as a whole. So yeah, it makes everything bigger, but again, you can't always make everything big. Like you can't always do this, which yeah, it's everywhere. You can't always do this, but it does sound cool in some situations. So yeah, the dry in. So here's our dry signal. We'll add the super compressed signal in, and you'll see it'll reinforce all of the drums. Like everything hits a bit harder. And that's one way to do parallel compression. The way I was demonstrating before, or going to demonstrate, was you just take just like turn it to a limiter, and then just take the transients off, and that kind of levels it out a bit as well. The third way is you go really far down, like so you capture a ton of the signal, then you only do a ratio of like 1.1-ish, like 1.05, 1.1, 1.15, and then you just have it slightly compress the entire signal down. And this kind of has some glue as well. Those toms sound kind of weak there, didn't they? Maybe because I have messed their routing up, I think. Oh, sorry, I just didn't have them soloed. One of those toms sounds quieter than the other one though. See, that's the thing with toms this low, is like they're really hard to fit in mixes. You also might, it's not a bad idea to use linear EQs and stuff on drums, just to make sure you don't have any like phase issues and stuff like that. Okay, so that's the three types of parallel compression you could do. One thing I forgot to do, which is commonly done, and is you can take your room mics and smash the crap out of them with the compressor. Again, can't make everything big, but this is commonly done, and it just adds some body, just like the parallel compression we kind of saw there. We'll just do this quick here. Oops. There we go. Okay. And I prefer this, just crushing the room mic and blending it into taste over the whole parallel compression thing, but you can do both, or it depends how you want your drums to sound. Oh, and when you're doing this like super compression stuff, you got to be careful of your EQing, because you're gonna hear the cymbals jump out at you, and the low end get out of control. And so you're always trying to keep things clean. So we'll just add our actual bus compressor here. We'll figure out what we actually want to do for it. Actually, that pumpy thing's kind of cool on this track. It's high energy. Let's just do the pumpy thing. Why not? Cool, so that's not a terrible drum mix. I mean, there's not that much you can do with this stuff, but like that's pretty solid to start with. We'll have to tweak a bunch of stuff to get to fit with everything else, and I'm sure we'll be modifying all the EQing and stuff we did. But that's kind of the basic stuff you would do for any drum mix, really. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything. Don't think so, but I'm sure we'll be coming back to it in the next videos, so yeah, stay tuned. I guess we'll try and fit those guitars in next and see how that goes. Cool, thanks for watching.